Welcome into this edition of the Roundball Report. I'm Monica McNutt, in for Andrew Dyer. As always, thanks for joining us. Today, folks, we're doing things a little bit differently, and I have my partner in crime for the day, Armon Lee of the Quarterly Report, the podcast. All right, set's a little different, right? We are going to do a he and she type show, right? So we'll discuss the topic. My guy will impart his version of wisdom. I will counter, or maybe we'll agree.
Can I say something real quick? Fellas, don't worry. We got this. I'm going to do it for the fellas out here, baby.
Is this man versus girl, woman, man versus woman? Anyway, all right, let's jump right into the first topic. We're going to stay here at home. Armon, the Washington Wizards, they signed Dwight Howard, mid-level exception, $5.3 million for this upcoming season. Marcin Gortat is gone.
Right.
They signed Ian Mahinmi to a 4-year, $64 million contract. Do you like the deal the Wizards did with Dwight Howard?
I feel like to look at the Dwight Howard signing in a vacuum doesn't really do it justice. The Wizards were in a predicament where they had really, their backs were against the wall. They were in a position where the entire Eastern Conference was either catching up or passing them because they have their awful cap situations, many of which happened in 2016, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later. They either had to make a move that would drastically change their roster or gamble on someone who clearly is talented but has his own set of issues that comes with it. So I like the move, understanding that there are significant pitfalls and potential for disaster that comes along with it. But the Wizards, they weren't afforded the opportunity to play it safe. They needed something to shake things up. Getting Dwight Howard is a plus on the floor. We don't know how he's going to affect the locker room, but again, they were in a position where they needed to make a move, and this was the best move available.
Considering Dwight Howard's history,
Right.
not the worst move. I'm not 100% sure it's going to help on the floor the way we envision.
Right.
Granted, in Charlotte, Dwight Howard was putting up 16, 12. He played 81 games that season. That's the longest he's been on the floor in a long time due to injuries.
Right.
But when I look at the system of the Wizards, and I'm not going to fake like I followed the Hornets diligently because I didn't. I don't see where he fits with John and Brad, who are supposed to be your marquee guys. Granted, I think the whole offense deserves to be reworked, period, as well. So it didn't cost them a ton, and so I get it, but you already got a locker room where last year we couldn't figure it out. So now you add in another puzzle piece?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, with the locker room is a real dynamic that I don't think any of us on the outside can intelligently speak on. We don't know how that situation. John seemingly has beef with everybody who comes in the locker room outside of Keith, right? So, yeah, there is potential for this to blow up in everyone's face. But they lost in the first round. Even with all the expiring contracts, I think I read somewhere that they have 8 expiring contracts on their roster right now. Even with that, they're over the cap projected for the 2019-20 season because of the Otto, the John, the Brad, and the Mahinmi deal. So they had no wiggle room. So unless they wanted to maybe move a piece here or there, the only thing they could have done, at least that has the potential, I'm not going to sit out here and say that they are as good as Boston or Philly, but this gives them at least a puncher's chance.
Puncher's chance, we'll take it. I'm not crazy about it, but I appreciate your logic on that one. They were sort of between a rock and a hard place.
I win.
Whatever. All right, we're going now to Carmelo Anthony. Likely to be out of OKC. We all can agree with that. It's been rumored that his preferred destination is Los Angeles, but it's also been said that his boy, one of his good friends, Chris Paul, is trying to get him to Houston. Now, those are probably the teams we keep hearing, but where do you think is a solid landing spot for Melo?
Okay, I'm a little biased. Let me preface this. I'm a Knicks fan alert, you know what I'm saying? So a lot of drama over here, a sad cloud over here. The best place for Carmelo Anthony is to have his behind sitting down in Europe or...
Are you serious?
He doesn't need to be in the league. Let's keep it funky. Again, I'm a Knicks fan. I'm also from Virginia. I remember vividly, Allen Iverson was playing in Memphis, right? I love AI. He probably was bussing Kyle Lowry and Michael Conley in practice. But he couldn't get in his head that he's going to be the sixth man because Memphis at that time was going with the youth movement. We saw the same thing play out last year in Oklahoma City. It was clear that Carmelo would be best suited if he was coming off the bench to a place where he could just kind of dominate the ball on that second unit. But his ego got in the way of what was best for the team and ultimately what was best for him because the defense for Melo I hear now is, oh, man, they wanted him to play this catch-and-shoot style of basketball. if you're not good at catching and shooting, why would anybody think that he should be a volume shooter? That just doesn't make sense to me.
I got you. Wow, you put him out the league.
Boom.
I put him with the Clippers.
Okay.
An outside chance if he's totally willing to sort of rework his game in San Antonio. Which is why I know San Antonio is wild, right? Like Melo's not a two-way player. He's not finna defend, not trying to get in pop system. However, he's been in the league since 2003.
Right.
He's always averaged at least 20 points until last season. So he's still got some get up and go. And now we're in a press in terms of rings. Now maybe if we're really talking rings, you got to go east at this point. If you're trying.
If he wants to go rings, he needs to be the 13th man off the bench. There's no Carmelo.
He should have been DeMarcus Cousins.
Yeah, man. Carmelo better try to go to state. He better try to go to Golden State. Look, the Knicks, they got better by trading Carmelo, even with Kristaps being hurt for like the last third of the season. The Thunder, they actually got worse, even with Paul George, even with the healthy Steven Adams, even with Russell averaging a triple-double again. They lost 2 more games. Carmelo Anthony is a black hole of destruction.
So he goes to the Clippers. It's the Knicks West.
if he wants to go to the Clippers, I mean,
he is not in a place where he's going to step back yet because he still got it. He came into class with Bron, right? Like, in his mind, I agree with you. Yeah. Numbers statistically, watching his body, he doesn't have the spring, the bounce that he once did. He needs to use some of Bron's routine to preserve his body. But I don't think Melo's in a place where he's going to admit that at all. So he's got to go somewhere where the volume comes back to him.
He's going to go where Chris Bosh is at, and where Dwayne Wade's at. And they're going to be right about the league, just like them watching LeBron like you and I.
Melo to Europe.
Man,
wow. Nia, that's a draw on that one, right? That's a tie. We're calling that one a tie. All right, up next, Tony Parker. No longer with the Spurs. Tony Parker is now in Charlotte. Signed a nice 2-year, $10 million deal, right? Over the course of the season, we know Kawhi Leonard was out.
Right.
Tony Parker recently said that the media blew his comments out of proportion. Now, let me get you what Tony said.
Right.
Tony said, I have no problem with Kawhi Leonard. We never had an argument, but when the journalist asked me if my injury was worse than Kawhi's, I said yes, because it was true. But that didn't lessen the significance of his injury. He took over the franchise, and I gave up the torch of the franchise willingly. It's very sad that the media took one quote and made it sound like I didn't want to play with him. He was the face of the franchise. You buying it?
No, I ain't buying anything. I'm not buying anything a French man tells me ever. Look, we need to put this in the proper perspective. First off, the idea that Tony Parker passed the torch to Kawhi Leonard, that's not just soaking in narcissism and he didn't pass the torch to Kawhi Leonard. So Tony Parker was a role player throughout his entire tenure. He was never the best Spur. He won the Finals MVP. I'm not trying to shortchange him. But Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili are clearly all-time greats better than Tony Parker, right? So he was the youngest of the 3. So if that's how he's doing that math in his head, whatever, I'm dismissing that. Also,
clearly,
do a Google search out there, ladies and gentlemen. Tony Parker, Brent Barry. He ain't the best teammate. You know what I'm saying? I'm not buying anything Tony Parker is selling. Get him out of there in San Antonio.
So this is what I am buying. That we, the collective media, have a way of printing gives no tone.
Correct.
Printing gives no tone.
No context.
I don't think that there's somewhere in the middle, right? There's the truth. There's 2 sides of the story, and there's somewhere in the middle. I don't know that Tony meant to stir up anything. It may have been slightly blown out of proportion. And when I think he says passing of the torch, he means like he was the point guard that sort of ran the team, passing of the torch.
You are so sweet. This is so
right?
nice.
Not like I'm giving you all the buckets.
You are shooting Tony Parker so much bail right now. You are very diplomatic.
Out of a Spurs organization, I just don't buy that you would just start kicking up dust all crazy like that. I mean, everybody was frustrated with Kawhi, but
I don't know.
I just don't.
Tony Parker got a lot of stuff around him anyway. And
this is true.
This idea that, he was like, my injury. First off, how do you know how bad someone else's injury is? You know what I mean? You're a player, so you know this far better than I.
A sprain is less than a tear. Well, we don't know what Kawhi was dealing with exactly. But
Kawhi, he's a mute. He doesn't talk. We don't know what he was dealing with, man. Who knows what Kawhi is going through right now? Yeah. Come on over.
I do think that we have a way of printing something and you run with it.
Yeah.
Because to this point, I think for him to say that we would have heard wrinkles of issues prior to getting to this point.
But what I'm saying is Tony Parker shouldn't have jumped out there anyway. He shouldn't have jumped out comparing injuries. Then this idea that he's passing the torch, you didn't pass the torch. You were playing in Charlotte right now, okay? So that torch weren't really shining that bright to begin with. Let's be honest.
Tony Parker was the floor general. You can't discount your guard, though, Armon. No? Okay.
Nah, get him out of here. Oui.
All right, so speaking of things being taken out of context, we're going to run out of time in this block. On the other side, we got to address some WNBA. We got to get into this Lance Stephenson, Kevin Pritchard deal. Was that taken out of context as well? Of course, we're talking LeBron, DeMarcus Cousins. There's lots left to discuss in terms of free agency. But really quickly, Armon, something that has caught your eye in free agency so far?
I really like what New Orleans has done. You know, with they got Elfrid Payton for a really cheap deal. They got the boy from Kentucky with Julius Randle from the Lakers, signed him for a 2-year deal. I really like what New Orleans is doing.
All right, I'll give my pick on the other side. Come on back because the Roundball report is not done just yet.